Yes, start.
Okay, great. Thank you once again, and my sincere apologies to everyone on the call. I didn't anticipate this tonight, but I guess it's one of those days. My name is Obiapo Richards, and I'm the current head of HR for Legal Services Nigeria Limited. And it's a great honor and privilege to be having this session with all of you. I've been a beneficiary of the many knowledge sessions I've held here, and that those sessions have been quite enriching. And I also thought I would find time within my own schedule to share my experience if given the opportunity. And I appreciate Dr. Adeosun for making that possible. Welcome all of us to this call, and I apologize once again for all the hitches we've been experiencing. And without wasting much further time, I would go straight to the meat of the matter. Today we are discussing transitioning from HR consulting to in-house HR practice, the pitfalls and takeaways. Basically, like I said earlier, while we're discussing human resources as a case study, I want everyone to also keep an open mind and relate to this as it deals majorly with all transitions, and when we talk about transition, we're talking about change, and maybe as we go back into the conversations, you're going to see the relationship between changes and transition. Now, our outline for this course, as you can see already, we have an introduction, then a conversation around the evolution of human resources, HR consulting and the rise of HR outsourcing, how both of them emerged, consulting and in-house dynamics compared, what the differences in these two areas of HR practice are, pitfalls that we are meant to look at when switching from consulting to in-house practice, and then consulting skills that we should less emphasis on while moving into in-house practice, and of course the in-house HR skills that should be prioritized. And we'll be looking at takeaways for a successful transition, a recap, and then some final thoughts on transitions generally. Please, next slide, sir. So the next tells us about managing transitions. And I'm encouraging everyone to focus on transitions generally, even though we're using HR consulting, moving from consulting to in-house as a case study. Now, be that individual, managing change has never been easy. It comes with a lot of apprehensions, difficulty trying to realign ourselves to the new environment or new circumstances or situations. And these things are what we are bound to deal with. For every person who seeks to build a career, you're meant to find yourself dealing with one form of change or the other, be it a change in role, a change in position, a change in organization. All of these changes come with transitions. There are elements of adjustments that must come along with any of this change that will take place. And these are the things that we refer to as transitions. Now, the human resource function is one area that has the most frequently recurring transitions. In other words, people in HR move very frequently across roles, across organizations, across industries. And for all of these movements, there are elements of change that comes with it, requiring us to make requisite adjustments to align ourselves properly in the new environment so that we can all perform adequately. And now, talking about the human resource consulting function and then human resource in-house practice, we'll not be able to understand the transitions involving these two if we don't first of all delve into the history or at least the evolution of human resource management as a practice. And that's what the next slide is going to be discussing or taking us through. Now, prior to the evolution of human resource management, I'm sure a lot of us will relate to the fact that the early man was regarded as a gatherer or hunter. It's either he hunted what he ate and ate it there and then, or he gathered what he could and ate. In fact, at first, he gathered and threw away the excesses. But over time, he learned how to gather and keep so that he can actually eat part of what he had gathered previously. And from there, he learned how to preserve. So from these gradual evolutions, man evolved to the point of developing skills around animal husbandry, crop production. Even the Bible tells us that when Adam and Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel, one was a farmer dealing in crops, and the other was a farmer dealing in wild animal husbandry, telling us that at that point in time, labor was essentially centered on individual skills. Now, gradually it evolved into those individuals growing their skills within their families. And then families or skills started being attributed or aligned to families. Families are known for certain skills, for certain professions. But I think as the demand and for their services or products grew, there was a need to begin to engage more persons. Hello, Doc. I don't know, the screen has gone off here. I don't know if it's the same thing for everybody. The screen sharing has stopped. And I'm trying to see if is mine visible?
Yes, but not full screen.
Is it full screen now?
No, it's not full screen. No, it's not full screen.
What about now?
It's not full screen, but it's on the page of the evolution of human resources.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe we can just manage it this way. I don't know.
Yes, let's just go on.
All right. So, so basically, the prehistoric time records that labor was essentially artisan-oriented, where individuals had skills that was domiciled with the individual, and oftentimes, expanded around families. Homegrown labor was a major feature of the time. And then over time, as demand for products or services of artisans grew, there was a need for them to begin to engage apprentices. And this evolved into what we called at the time cottage industries, which were small homegrown factories that produced within their pre-World War II. Due to the discovery of the early machines or early mechanization, and of course, the evolution of the scientific management theory, led essentially by Frederick Taylor, studies or rather efforts were made to find out how to increase efficiencies. How does labor, get or give the best of what it can? And that was at the point where conversation around specializations, where differentiation of functions also became a thing, and jobs were broken down into little segments, leading to each person performing a specific function, which of course I think the popular term that we called it then was the division of labor. But of course this was made possible essentially by the rise in mechanization, which led to the early factories, replacing industries. And of course, large workforce became a thing, and there became exploitations by the factory owners at the time. It was also around this time that motivation studies came into place on how from the staff. Post-World War II, emphasis on employee productivity increased. This time around, concepts of job descriptions were developed. The concept of pay and also measurement of performance were introduced in the 1960s. Now, between the 60s to the 80s was known as the social issues era. And then it was at this time that human resource got referred to as personnel management. Oh, sorry, that got personnel management, which was the major feature of the time of the 45 to 60, transformed into human resources, and more computerized means of managing personnel were evolved. And then the concept of human resource information systems, learning and development were introduced into human resource management. Now, between the early 80s to the 90s, emphasis was laid on increased automation. Of course, still trying to increase efficiency and effectiveness. Now, the current time that we find ourselves in is features majorly the concept of globalization, accelerated tech advancements, cultural competition amongst companies, and of course, the evolution of the internet, which has fast-tracked every sector of every facet of human life, but essentially it has had its own significant impact on the human resource management practice. Now, HR consulting and the rise of outsourcing. After the evolution of human resource based on the increased production or increased demand, a rise in mechanization, and of course, increased workforce and all of that. The human resource consulting practice emerged as a separate function around the 1960s to the of functions, and the need for you to have specialists or professionals dedicated to specific areas of HR to intervene in the operations of companies or organizations. Now, this was also accelerated further by the growth of HR technology in the 80s, of course, with the advent of the computer and the internet as well. It was around this time that the human resource functions gained considerable traction as a lot of companies metamorphosed around this time, as in consulting firms started emerging, providing specialized services. Now, between the 1990s and the 2000s, the emphasis from just technology shifted to the emphasis on strategy. This time around, organizations started to take a holistic approach towards growing their businesses. So from the point of inception, a company begins to look at the larger picture, where it is headed, and of course, what it wants to be known for, how it wants to be identified, and what should stand out as, its major identity or its core contribution to humanity. And this focus on strategy also led to a number of changes in the practice of human resources, also increasing the influence of human resource function in organizations. Now, as the outsourcing function, or rather as the consulting function emerged, it led also to the outsourcing function, because as companies became specialized in specific areas of human resources, the companies who needed their services saw the need at some point to begin to outsource some special elements of their human resource operations to these companies with specialties in certain areas. Recruitment outsourcing was one of the first areas of human resource outsourcing practice. And of course, this industry started in the early 70s, where such firms as Hendrick and Struggles and Korn and Ferry were launched. Now, the human resource, so the recruitment process outsourcing industry, as we know it today, started gaining traction also in the 2000s with the explosive introduction of the internet. As I said earlier, the internet gave rise to an explosion of the human resource function, as many companies or many entities, started emerging around this time, taking advantage of the convenience that technology provided. Now, the trending need for reduced general and administrative spending also contributed to the outsourcing practice becoming a theme in recent time, as companies also realized that by outsourcing certain functions within their HR or human resource activities, they were able to reduce costs and also enhance effectiveness and efficiency. And of course, the growth in outsourcing also led also to a further increase in the consulting function, as both of them were more or less serving each other pari passu. Now, it's important for us also to look at the human resource in-house practice functions and the consulting functions. In summary, there's really no major distinctions in the functions performed, but the differences lie majorly in how they are performed. The same human resource planning that is done in-house, a consultant can equally be consulted to perform the same human resource planning for an organization. The recruitment that can be done in-house can also be outsourced to, a human resources company as well. All the functions of human resources, or all the areas of operations of human resources that can be performed in-house can equally be outsourced, as consulting firms tend to provide services in these areas as well. But the major distinctions in HR in-house practice and consulting practice is how these functions are delivered, or the approach to delivering them. And that takes us to the next slide, which talks about the dynamics of consulting and in-house practice compared. Sincere apologies, I had to take a drink of water there. So now, in reviewing the dynamics of in-house practice and consulting, we are going to be looking critically at the context in which all of these roles are performed. Starting with the client relationship angle, for the in-house HR practitioner, his focus or his colleagues, his scope of influence or scope of, or terms of scope of influence basically is the internal stakeholders of the organization, where he deals with the management, the line managers, the staff, and every other entity that operates within the organization, while the consultant himself focuses more on external clients, offering bespoke solutions. Now, of course, this also affects the way each person deals with their stakeholders. The next context I want us to look at is the depth of expertise. Now, within the in-house practice, an in-house practitioner is expected to have a very wide range or broad knowledge base around the functions that he performs. He's meant to have a full understanding of all areas of human resources. But oftentimes, the degree of knowledge in some of these specific areas may not be as in-depth, as it should be. While on the consulting end of it, you have specialized expertise in specific HR domains. The consultant, or in a consulting environment, you have consultants assigned to specific HR responsibilities. It could be L&D, it could be organizational development, it could be performance planning, performance management as a function. But whatever it is, the consultant has individuals specialized in these functions, and those individuals are, sent to organizations that need the services of the consultant. Now, on the autonomy and decision-making authority, you'll find that the in-house HR practitioner actually has greater autonomy in making decisions. He has more powers to affect change or impact the organization than the external consultant, who has limited autonomy and also limited decision-making authority. Oftentimes, in most environments, consultants would come in, make their findings, make their recommendations, but it is often left to the in-house person to implement. Of course, there are also been instances where the consultant is supposed to implement, but in most cases, the implementer is usually the in-house person. But what this simply means is that the in-house person has more capacity to actually impact on the organizations and make transformations or decisions that are binding on the company than the consultant does. Now, in resource availability and constraints, the in-house practitioner has direct access to all organizational resources. While for the consultant, because he's seen as an external party, his access to resources are very limited. These resources could oftentimes be information, it could also be items relating to what you would call patented information, basically, or patented products, which the company may not be too keen on releasing to an external party. Of course, that's also why non-disclosure agreements are usually signed for contracts involving external parties, so that any information that is divulged to the consultant will not at any point in time be used without the prior knowledge or consent of the company itself. Another area or another context where in-house practice and consulting differs is in the project term. Now, why the in-house practitioner has a long-term commitment to the company, he sees his presence in the organization as a long-term goal and, makes his plans within that long term. The consultant himself is essentially focused on the project at hand and limits him or herself essentially to all matters relating to that project and does not go beyond the project. And these are the various areas where distinctions lie between in-house consulting and in-house HR practice and HR consulting practice. Now, the project focus and the long-term commitment, or the dynamics that we've so far discussed so far, also requires that each of these persons, over the course of their experiences, develop certain skills that tend to, lie or become more prominent with them while they are executing their functions. Now, when a transition is taking place, the challenge with transition is that I think I lost my connection there. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you're audible and your screen is showing again.
Am I still connected, please?
Yes, you are. I can see your screen and I can hear your voice.
Okay, great, thank you. So now I was saying that in my own experience, I had been in consulting for about 6 years. And when I moved into in-house practice, a few of the consulting capabilities I had acquired along the way, I found it quite hard to let go. And of course, this led to what I would call the pitfall that I experienced, which I feel a lot of us should watch out for if we're experiencing this kind of transition. Now, if you're moving from consulting to in-house practice, one should, watch out for over-reliance on consulting skills and mindset. And one of those areas of consulting skills and mindset that I will talk about is the project nature of consulting engagements. You realize that when you're working on a project, everything you're doing is solely around that project. You probably sent out, your questionnaires and surveys. You've gathered all your feedbacks. You're collating your reports and you're preparing reports. Sometimes in-house also, you notice that you are supposed to act as a consultant in certain areas. But if you come from, consultancy aspect of an in-house person, however, I would advise everyone who is moving from consulting to in-house practice to be very mindful of, this mindset. Take, for instance, I had an instance where I carried out a process review where we're trying to reevaluate our processes in-house. I focused so much on making the report so elaborate that I spent longer time that was adequate, for an in-house person. And of course, as I was spending more time trying to develop these elaborate reports around the anomalies within the processes that we're seeing and recommendations for improvement, other areas of my in-house capabilities or my in-house focus started suffering. The day-to-day transactional areas of, monitoring personnel, taking note of, time and attendance and the likes, even ensuring that processes that were already ongoing were still adhered to, suffered. I focused so much on the changes I was trying to implement, forgetting that the company was still an ongoing process, as in an ongoing concern, and that there was a need to, even while you're doing what you're doing, to ensure that the process still continues, pending the introduction of the new ones. The second thing that I will also advise people to watch out for is difficulty in adjusting to your new work environment and culture. Now, the environment around consulting and in-house practice are entirely different scenarios. And it often takes considerable effort adjusting to an in-house environment if you're coming from a consulting background. Often in consulting, there is this greater leverage to, manage your own time, work within your own time, focus only on deliverables and reports when they are required. But as an in-house person, more is expected of you. Your attention is needed day to day by various processes, by various individuals within the organization. And if you do not understand that, you need to drop that freedom that you had within the consulting space and you bring it into the in-house space, then over time, you're going to be seen as insensitive to the plight of your colleagues and workers. The management may also see you as not paying sufficient attention to the organization. So it is important that while you transit from consulting to in-house practice, be mindful that your freedom to use your time as you desire is greatly limited, and your attention is needed in multiple areas at the same time, and you have to find a way to ensure that you're available for all of these demands. Now, the other thing that you should going to be very conscious of when transitioning from consulting to in-house is struggling to build trust and credibility with internal stakeholders. This is an area that I consider very, very vital, because even from the moment you come in as a HR person in a new environment, some of your colleagues are already sizing you up and measuring you up to see if you are fitting of the respect they should accord you. They will size you up and they will even test your credibility. And if you do not pass this test, they will treat you with disdain and contempt. And this can actually throw you off completely. It can make you, lose the self-confidence. It can make you even lose focus on your work. So it's important that once you get into a new environment, one of the key things you should be very conscious of is to build trust and credibility within the internal stakeholders. You can achieve this by having an open mind, in engaging with people, and ensure that, of course, you have that engagement constantly. But more importantly, it is important that you know your onions, you know what you're doing. If some of your peers within the system were to poke you, because sometimes some of them tend to intentionally just poke you to see how grounded you are in your practice. And if you do not pass that poking test, then they treat you with the greatest level of levity, and they may cease to take you seriously. So you must be conscious of earning that trust, establishing your credibility once you get in. Another area that is very important for us to watch out for is inadequate understanding of your company's culture and business goals. Now, the consulting environment gives you a different mindset. You often go into organizations, or even consultants are beginning to change that mindset, thinking that your sole aim is to introduce a solution. But it's important to know that coming from a consulting background, you must remove yourself from that orientation of thinking that you have all the solution. You're coming to effect change, and that your presence is supposed to bring a transformation. Because if you come with that mindset, you may lose critical elements of the company's basic existence that would, find you at loggerheads with essentially maybe the management of the organization. So the first thing that you should also be very mindful of is understanding the culture of the company you have come into, and of course, their business priorities, how the company functions, what are their, strengths, and what areas have they chosen to pay more attention to. It is after you've gained these insights, you may now begin to look for areas to improve around the knowledge you've gained concerning the organization. But don't feel that the knowledge you've gathered outside as a consultant or from some other organization, that you can just bring that knowledge and just transfer it immediately into the new organization. Oftentimes, it's met with severe resistance, and it also tells badly on the human resource professional. Now, the other area that I think is very critical that we should watch out for is the failure for a consultant who has moved into the in-house environment to adapt to a more operational environment than the project-based work. I think I mentioned this in passing earlier. The project-based nature of the human resource consulting activity often makes the orientation of the consultant, solely focused on specific issues. That mindset needs to be dropped. It needs to be de-emphasized considerably so that you can take in holistically all the operational areas that your function demands and be able to give each and every one of them adequate attention. If you fail to do this and you find yourself operating on the project mindset, you realize that you're going to be spending unnecessary time on specific activities within your scope of influence or operations, which will also see so many other areas of your operations suffering significantly. Now, what are the key things or skills that we are supposed to, ignore or de-emphasize when we are in an in-house environment as consultants or as transiting professionals. The first one is overemphasis on short-term projects and quick fixes. Like I said, the consultant comes in and just wants to, it's like someone has a headache and you're introducing Panadol immediately. The goal of Panadol is to reduce the headache. The consultant comes in and thinks that his major job is to just give Panadol. If you transit from a consulting environment with an in-house environment, you must drop this mindset, because there are no quick fixes in an environment where the emphasis is long-term. So you must be more critical. You must evaluate, whatever projects or whatever introductions you're intending to make critically and see how it fits into the fabric of the organization that you've come into, and ensure that there's an alignment between the expectations of your management and the operations that exist, as well as whatever it is that you think you're introducing. Now, also, we tend to focus a lot as consultants on external clients. You might still carry that consulting mindset of dealing with external parties as if they are your priorities. But moving into an in-house environment suggests a change in priorities instantly. It means that the emphasis now is no longer on the in-house, on the external persons, but more on the in-house personnel. The persons that you're meant to be consulting for or administering solutions to are the in-house stakeholders. And this should form, the basis of your work. Now, also, limited understanding of organizations' long-term goals and vision is another area that consultants tend to suffer. Like I said, a lot of times you come in with the your understanding of what solutions should be. You feel you have an understanding of how matters should be addressed based on your consulting background. You forget to take into consideration your new environment, their overriding visions and missions, and the goals that they've set for themselves long-term. To understand that whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you may want to introduce, or whatever change you may want to bring about, has to conform to these visions, to these strategies of the organization. Where there is a misalignment between that strategic outlook and your novel ideas that you may be coming with, then just be sure that you're going to meet a lot of resistance, which may also cause you a lot of trouble within the course of your practice. Hello, am I still on? Okay. Hello, can you all hear me? Hello?
I can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for responding. Okay, so another thing I want us to focus on is, now that you've left your consulting environment and you're in the in-house practice environment, what are the areas that the person transiting should focus more on? What should form your priorities in terms of the solutions you may want to develop, the introductions you may want to make? The first thing is you have to build a new orientation around strategy. You have to develop a strategic mindset. In other words, you de-emphasize quick fixes and you begin to focus on the long term. You start developing a solution by looking at the end first. And then you draw down to what should be the first step towards achieving, the progress that's desired to take everyone to what that endpoint should be. In other words, you must have an understanding of what that organization is meant for, what they exist for, what is their motivation for being in business, what are they seeking to achieve, how have they proposed to carry out their business, what are their major concerns, in the value that they want to bring into humanity or into the market. If you have lack of understanding of these things, then you also, your ability to significantly impact on the company's long-term goals will be impaired. Second thing that you should focus on when transiting, or when you've transited into an in-house environment, is to build trust and credibility with the, like I said earlier, with the internal stakeholders. Why we talked about the emphasizing that from the consulting, and you have as an in-house person to ensure that this is a critical area that you give considerable attention. Why? Because if you fail to build the needed trust within your team, within your colleagues, especially peers who are on the same level with you, you find that you end up exiting that organization with very minimal impact. In fact, you might even end up exiting it being ridiculed. And one of the first things to building trust is, like I said earlier, openness, engagement. Also come from the point of, wanting to learn. Allow your colleagues, to feel comfortable around you, being able to display their knowledge. Because if you come in like somebody who seems to know it all, there might be a lower tendency, for people to actually share their knowledge and ideas with you. And some of this is manifesting, maybe people in the course of a conversation or a team meeting, people say things and you're very quick to correct, or very quick to identify maybe errors in what people have done. If you make that a part of you, you would find people significantly withdrawing their trust from you. And over time, some of them would even want to test you and see if you're even as sound as you're claiming to be. Why you're not expected to act as a dullard or somebody who doesn't know what he or she is doing, you're also not expected to be too frontal with the knowledge you may possess. However, allow them to always be free to share and have a say in the things that you're proposing. Make them key partners in decisions, in projects, in any endeavor that you're trying to introduce into the organization. If you blank slide them, then you're going to meet a lot of resistance, and it would, limit your ability to make impact. Now, of course, we talked about understanding the organization's culture and business goals. This also needs to be emphasized as well. Now, the other one is collaboration and influence. Now, in a consulting environment, I must tell you that from my experience, you are actually, yes, there are some, but this collaboration is often quite limited, because you see yourself, the consultant, focusing more on your own activities, the research you're conducting, the information you've gathered, the analysis you're trying to generate from your information, and of course, the solution you want to profile. Most of the time, the consultant actually works alone. He only sometimes engages peers to probably discuss ideas, or some solutions is proposing. But in the in-house environment, you are expected to be a member of every team. You are a partner in every process that exists within that organization. And you cannot do without imbibing that collaborative mindset, where you are available to offer help, provide solutions when it is expected of you, or make inputs whenever necessary, or guidance even most times, because oftentimes you as the HR will be looked at to provide guidance on how things should go. Now, the other thing about influence is that this is directly related to building credibility. If you've not built sufficient credibility in that environment, then it means that your influence in that environment may be very minimal. So it is important that you engage in a manner that allows people to have confidence in you and your ability to, resolve issues around your practice. They should have confidence in your ability to demonstrate the knowledge that you have. And of course, in the certainty that you are competent in the role you're holding. the moment people feel that you're not as competent as they expect or as you claim to be, then your ability to influence them also significantly diminishes. So we must be very conscious on how we, apply ourselves in an in-house environment, because the only way we can truly influence is by, first of all, establishing that camaraderie that allows free collaboration with your function, and also showing that you know what you're doing. Once people have confidence and know what you're doing, then they will always more readily listen to you and be willing to take ideas from you. Now, when transitions happen, or when transiting from in-house, from consulting practice to in-house practice, there are a few takeaways I think we should all keep in mind. The first one is, it still boils down to what we're discussing: develop a deep understanding of the company's culture, business goals, and internal dynamics. How does this company function? Who are the real decision makers? You may think decision makers are management, but I can tell you there are people within the rank and file, and even your peers, who are more influential in some of the decisions that are taken within the organization. As an in-house person or in-house HR practitioner, it is on you to identify these key persons whose opinions have significant weight in the organization, and align with them, so that over time, you may be able to sell through your own projects or your own introductions to the organization. Now, this also deals with you being able to understand the company's entire culture, because oftentimes we really can't change what we don't understand. It's when you have a full understanding of the company's culture that you may now begin to see gaps that may need to be, tweaked or filled. You have is manifesting in that internal environment. Now, the area of building strong relationships is also something that should be given strong attention. Without strong relationship within the organization, as we mentioned earlier, we talked about developing a deep understanding of the company's culture. business goals and internal dynamics. I also made reference to building strong relations with organizations whose opinions are, given considerable weight. It is important to align with these people so that your own projects and programs will be given considerable attention as well. And then the other thing is you must be prepared to adapt and learn new skills. You must be open to learning new things and, of course, dropping or unlearning some things that you already have. Essentially, the freedom from a consulting environment becomes greatly limited within an in-house practice. So you must not expect to have that level of freedom anymore. Even the time allotted to you to perform specific projects in a consulting environment, you spend, yes, you know what time frame you're working with, and you realize that you spend a lot of time, dealing with specific, but in an in-house environment, you have to, well, I think the word here is multitask, even though that particular skill is being de-emphasized. But you really can't do without multitasking in an in-house environment, because at every point in time, your attention is required for one thing or the other, and you must make yourself available to attend to every of those needs. The other thing also, you must set clear expectations and boundaries. I think this is one of the key functionalities of a HR person, being very clear in their communication. From the moment you're engaging with anybody on any grounds, and be clear. If you're communicating performance objectives to individuals, KPIs and the likes, you must be sure that is understand exactly what expectations that the organization, their mind fall short of those expectations. And of course, you also have to set clear boundaries. Setting clear boundaries is making people understand limitations that, borders all interactions. As the HR person, you are actually the conscience of the organization, but you're also the custodian of the rules and regulations that guide that organization. So it's on you to understand that the regimentation or the low regimentation that consulting provides will no longer apply in an in-house environment, as more is expected of you to implement strict measures that ensures controls around processes, around policies, and around guidelines. Oftentimes, a lot of consultants or people with consulting background tend to miss this because the consulting environment is actually a bit more, what I call it, random per se. There is no such strict regimentation as to rules and regulations as they are in an in-house environment. Now, additional points that I think is very critical for anybody transiting from consulting to an in-house practice that they need to really carry along or take note of is one. I said it earlier, in all communication, ensure that clarity is achieved. Be sure that you are properly understood in all conversations, in all written communications. Focus on achieving clarity. Now, it is also important that for everything you do as an in-house person, I think I remember attending a class where, I think it was even the doctor who was speaking on the day, he said that even if you just had a short meeting with a colleague on maybe why they came late on a certain day, it's important to document even such interactions as activities engaged. Documentation of activities within in ascertaining, first of all, that you as a HR person is actually doing something within the system. And of course, it also provides evidence of the things that you would have done. But more than that, it serves to also, protect and, preserve the organization. Protect in the sense that where there are agreements around earlier entered engagements, records show the true position of what that engagement is. The positions of entities within the organization, if you are keeping or adhering strictly to proper documentation of all processes and all activities, then at no point will you be found wanting that people would give interpretations to situations that naturally did not exist, because your documentation will show the true position of that situation or what the true position is, and of course, eliminate any room for ambiguity and for conjectures. Now, I would also advise against the practice of the art of empathy without attachment. I say this because oftentimes in showing empathy, we oftentimes tend to go on just empathy to align ourselves to the individuals involved. And this tends to reduce our objectivity, especially when there is a need to take decisions that are not entirely be favorable to the party with whom you've just shown empathy. Yes, we must find a way to, ensure that we understand and feel the pains of the staff, but that should not also stop us from being objective and treating issues on their merits, as opposed to applying emotions around them. Now, to be successful in in-house practice as well, from my experience, it is important to engage frequently. And when I say engage, I mean engage all stakeholders as frequently as possible. There is a need to be in constant touch with the personnel, with the management, with the line managers, your peers, so that at every point in time, you actually know, as they put it, you can feel the pulse of the organization. You know what the mindset, and the orientation of the people you're working with is. And this will also inform you on what actions you may need to take to ensure that you maintain a fairly healthy work environment for everyone, and of course, a functionally effective environment for management. Now, I'd like to do a quick recap of the conversations we've been having so far. We've already treated the evolution of resources, and we made mention that and cottage production, the full-blown mechanized production. We also highlighted the fact that consulting became necessary as HR became more differentiated. In other words, as labor became differentiated and the need for specialties arose. The emergence of HR firms and then outsourcing as a special area of HR became a trend. Both in-house HR practice and consulting practices appear to be quite similar, However, they differ majorly in the context in which they are performed. They perform the same activities, is the same recruitment, is the same manpower planning, the same performance management, the same learning and development. But this time around, the context in which it is done is different. In one environment, your focus is on, in another environment, you are an outsider introducing an intervention into a new environment that you're not part. Of course, we discussed how these dynamics affect the different areas of the HR practice. Now, also we talked about when considering transition in between two roles, we must always keep an open mind and prepare to learn, unlearn, and relearn. In other words, we should not hold too strongly to some of the things we've gathered in the course of our consulting practice, or even the experience we've had from other places. We should also be willing to let go some personality traits or acquired skills that may not entirely align with the internal environment where we have found ourselves. And we should be willing to relearn the new dynamics that is prevalent in that environment so that we can properly align ourselves and make greater impact. Now, to succeed as an in-house HR, it's important to emphasize clear communication and relationship management, which we just dealt with in our last slide. And of course, there's also a need for us to continue to engage constantly with all. So, the transition from consulting to in-house practice. The essence of this conversation actually is to deal with transitions. Transitions are bound to happen. For Criteros, inevitable. And many people, see a job as being more than just what they do. It's more of who they are. In other words, I mean, you can't be doing something and you begin to think that you're actually distinct from that thing you're performing. People's jobs are who they really are. And oftentimes it's different to remove that person that you've become in an old role and now take on a new personality in a new role. And that's where the challenges with transition comes in. So it's what we acknowledge that, yes, in that old role, we have different personality. We were a different people, but in this new environment, we may need to begin, to drop some of our, acquired traits from the old environment and begin to build new ones in the new environment. And as a quote by William Bridges that said that he tried to create a distinction between change and transition. And for him, according to him, he said, change is an event, but the transition is the process that you go through in responding to change. To use change and transition interchangeably. Why? Change is the incident itself. If you move from one environment to the other, that's the change. But the things that cause, the anxieties that you feel, the things that, provide challenges, while trying to adjust that change, is now what we refer to as transition. And that's why it said that transitions are not the issues really, but the important thing is how well do we respond to, the challenges that accompany it. William Bridges further went ahead to say that we resist transition not because we can't accept the change, but because we can't accept letting go of the piece of ourselves that we'll have to give up when and because the situation has changed. So in other words, the trouble we face in transitions is not essentially that, the change itself is a bad thing, but rather we struggle with having to give up aspect of ourselves that comfortable with, and now having to imbibe new personalities, new capabilities, and new qualities will define us. So we should be conscious of this so that, I mean, in going into a transition, you already know what to expect and you're prepared ahead of time that you're bound to, leave some aspects of your personality. And if you have that knowledge, it enables you to identify those personalities earlier. You can more easily identify those traits that you may need to de-emphasize, to unlearn, and then begin to also focus on those ones in the new environment that you now have to imbibe. You can find yourself properly aligning to the new environment in a manner that allows you to not just conform to their realities, but also be impactful in driving the change that they desire. Finally, I would want to tell us that during the transitions, we must bear in mind that, yes, there is a struggle, but don't see it as a struggle. Just see it as you as a person are transitioning. You're basically adjusting to, a change event that has just taken place. You're metamorphosizing is like a butterfly that becomes, a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. Once that change happens, new abilities are acquired, new environments and new capabilities are also, demonstrated. This is exactly what happens during transitions. And if we understand that it is not us leaving ourselves, but us acquiring, elements that will make us better, stronger version of ourselves, I think it will help us manage the emotional and mental strain that often accompanies transitions. Thank you all for your time. And once again, I appreciate this opportunity and apologize for all the issues we experienced. I also realize I neglected most of my audience in the course of this conversation, but I hope that maybe with the time we have now, if there are questions or in the course of taking questions and reactions, we can all engage more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your brilliant presentation, notwithstanding the challenges. If anybody has any question or comment, let's quickly ask. Anybody? Quick question, comment, contributions? All right. Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. We'll have you
Thank you very much
once
again for the opportunity.
very short.
Really
Thank you so much.
have a wonderful evening, everyone.